Commander Valerie Crane was going to get away with it. She'd stolen over $400,000 from the hospital pharmacy, had systematically falsified patient records for 3 years, had endangered dozens of patients through negligent care while she was high on the medications she was stealing, and she was going to walk away clean, because Valerie Crane was very good at playing the victim, very good at making other people look guilty, and very good at destroying anyone who got too close to discovering what she'd done. The Navy thought they were investigating a caring nurse who'd been falsely accused by a jealous colleague. They had no idea they were being played by a master manipulator who'd been getting away with crimes for most of her 23-year career. It started 4 years earlier at Naval Hospital, Jacksonville, when Valerie first discovered how easy it was to steal narcotics. If you knew the system well enough, she'd been a nurse for 19 years, respected senior, trusted, with administrative access to the pharmacy ordering system, and she'd developed a dependency on painkillers after a back injury, a dependency that had grown from legitimate prescriptions to something much darker. The prescriptions ran out, her doctors wouldn't renew them, so Valerie found another way. She started creating phantom patients, fake admission records for patients who didn't exist, complete medical histories, documented pain complaints, legitimate-looking orders for pain medications. The pharmacy filled the orders, sent the medications to the nursing unit, and Valerie intercepted them before anyone noticed they were for patients who weren't actually there. It was simple, elegant, and it worked perfectly for 6 months. Then she got greedy. Instead of just stealing enough for personal use, Valerie realized she could sell the excess. There were people, other addicts, dealers, desperate patients who would pay good money for prescription narcotics. Over 3 years, Valerie stole and sold over $400,000 worth of medications, built a systematic operation that funneled drugs out of the hospital and cash into her accounts. She was careful, varied the phantom patients, used different names, spread the thefts across multiple months so no single spike would trigger an audit, and she kept working as a nurse, kept providing patient care, kept up the appearance of a dedicated professional, except she was also using heavily. And when you're high, patient care suffers. Valerie made mistakes, missed medication doses, documented assessments she hadn't performed, made clinical errors that endangered patients. Other nurses noticed, started questioning her judgment, started documenting their concerns. That's when Lieutenant Sarah Chen became a problem. Chen was an IC nurse, conscientious, detail-oriented, the kind of nurse who followed every protocol and documented everything meticulously. She noticed Valerie's errors, noticed patterns, noticed medications that were supposed to be given, but couldn't be found in the automated dispensing cabinets. Chen started investigating, quietly pulling records, comparing pharmacy orders to patient records, looking for discrepancies, and she found phantom patients, found medication orders for people who didn't exist. Chen brought her concerns to the chief of nursing. Commander Crane has been ordering medications for patients who aren't in the system. I think she might be diverting narcotics. The chief of nursing reviewed the evidence, found the phantom patients, found the medication orders, and confronted Valerie. Valerie was ready. She'd been preparing for this possibility for 3 years. "Those aren't my orders," she said smoothly. "Someone must be using my access codes to create fraudulent orders. This is identity theft, not diversion. Your access codes are your responsibility, and I reported them compromised 6 months ago. Check your records. I filed a report saying my login had been acting strange, that I suspected someone else was accessing my account." The chief checked, found a report. Valerie had filed a report she'd created specifically as cover for this moment. "If your codes were compromised, who had access to them?" Valerie hesitated, as if reluctant to accuse anyone. Then quietly, "Lieutenant Chen has been asking me for access to pharmacy ordering for months. Said she wanted to learn the administrative side. I told her no, that it violated protocol. She seemed upset about it." "Are you saying Lieutenant Chen is framing you?" "I'm saying someone is using my codes to steal medications, and the person who's investigating me is the same person who's been trying to get access to those systems." Valerie's voice was sad. "I don't want to believe Sarah would do this, but the evidence." The chief of nursing opened an investigation into both Valerie and Chen. The Navy investigators reviewed the evidence, found the phantom patients, found the medication orders using Valerie's codes, found Valerie's report claiming her access had been compromised. They interviewed Chen. Lieutenant, did you request access to Commander Crane's pharmacy ordering system? Yes, I wanted to understand the workflow better. I'm interested in nursing administration and Commander Crane offered to show me how the system works. Did Commander Crane give you her access codes? No, she showed me the system using her own login. I never had independent access, but you could have observed her entering her password. Chen hesitated. I suppose so, but I didn't. I wasn't trying to steal her credentials. The investigators noted the hesitation, noted that Chen had opportunity to obtain Valerie's codes. They pulled Chen's patient care records, found she'd been working extra shifts, covering for other nurses, had access to the medication dispensing systems on multiple units. Lieutenant Chen had means, motive, and opportunity. The lead investigator told his team she wanted access to pharmacy ordering. Crane refused, so Chen took the codes without permission and used them to divert medications. What about Crane? The orders were placed using her codes. She reported them compromised, filed documentation, took appropriate protective actions. The investigator closed his file. I think Chen is our thief. She's framing Crane to deflect suspicion. Chen was suspended pending court-martial. Valerie expressed sympathy publicly. I hope Sarah gets the help she needs. Addiction is a disease. I just wish she'd come to me instead of stealing. Privately, Valerie celebrated. She'd successfully diverted suspicion, made Chen look like the criminal, protected her operation. Chen's court-martial was approaching. The evidence against her was circumstantial but mounting. She'd had access to Valerie's codes, had been working on units where medications went missing, had no alibi for the times when phantom patient orders were placed. Chen's lawyer was pessimistic. The prosecution is building a strong case. They're going to argue you stole Crane's credentials and used them to divert medications for sale. Unless we can prove someone else did it, you're likely to be convicted. But I didn't do it. Crane is lying. Can you prove that? Chen couldn't. She had no evidence that Valerie was the thief, only suspicions that Valerie had framed her. Meanwhile, Valerie continued stealing, more carefully now, smaller amounts, varied methods. She also started planting more evidence against Chen. A few text messages from a burner, phoned to Chen's number offering to buy medications, some cash deposits to Chen's account from an untraceable source, actually Valerie's money, transferred through intermediaries, building a case, making sure Chen's conviction was certain. But Valerie made one mistake. She got high at work, took a double dose of her stolen medications before a shift, thought she could handle it. She couldn't. Patient Captain Robert Nash coded during her shift. Heart attack. Needed immediate intervention. Valerie was too impaired to respond effectively. Fumbled the code. Made errors. Nash died, despite the code team's efforts. The death review found multiple errors in Valerie's response. Delayed interventions, incorrect medication doses, poor clinical judgment. Commander Crane, can you explain your response to Captain Nash's code? Valerie couldn't remember half of it. She'd been too high. It was a chaotic situation. I did my best. Your documentation shows you gave epinephrine at the wrong dose. Delayed defibrillation. Made multiple errors that the code team had to correct. I was under stress. It was my first code in months. You'd been a nurse for 23 years. This wasn't your first code. The investigators started looking more closely at Valerie, pulled her recent patient care records, found more errors, more missed medications, more lapses in judgment, and they found something else. Patterns in her behavior that matched known signs of substance abuse. Valerie realized she was in danger. The investigation was shifting from Chen to her. If they kept digging, they'd find the truth. She needed to redirect their attention. Fast. Valerie did what she did best. She played the victim. She went to the investigators with tears in her eyes. I need to tell you something. I've been struggling with PTSD from a deployment 5 years ago. I've been having flashbacks, anxiety, difficulty concentrating. It's affecting my work, and I didn't want to admit it because I was afraid of losing my career. Why are you telling us now? Because Captain Nash died, and it's my fault. Not because I diverted medications. I didn't do that. But because I was impaired by my PTSD and I couldn't function properly during the code. Valerie's voice broke convincingly. I need help. I need treatment. And I'm willing to accept administrative action for not disclosing my condition earlier. Commander, are you saying your errors during Nash's code were due to PTSD, not substance abuse? I've never abused substances. I have a documented mental health condition that I failed to report. That's my crime. Not theft, not diversion. Valerie met their eyes. Test me for drugs right now. You won't find anything. The investigators did test her, found nothing. Valerie had been clean for 3 days, knowing this moment might come. The drug test is clean. Because I'm not using drugs. I have PTSD, and I'm willing to undergo treatment and accept consequences for not reporting it sooner. The investigators consulted with JAG, found that if Valerie was suffering from unreported PTSD, that was an administrative matter, not criminal. We're recommending Commander Crane be placed on medical leave for PTSD treatment, administrative action for failure to report, but no criminal charges. Valerie accepted the medical leave, entered a military PTSD treatment program, played the traumatized veteran seeking help, and continued to frame Chen for the medication thefts. Valerie completed her PTSD treatment program. The Navy psychiatrists noted her progress. Commander Crane has demonstrated significant improvement. She's engaged with therapy, shown insight into her condition, and developed healthy coping mechanisms. What they didn't know was that Valerie had been lying in every therapy session, inventing flashbacks she'd never had, describing nightmares about a deployment that had been routine, performing the role of traumatized veteran with the same skill she'd used to play dedicated nurse. She was released back to duty with a recommendation for continued outpatient therapy and light duty restrictions. Chen's happened 2 weeks later. The prosecution presented their case. Chen had obtained Crane's access codes through deception, had created phantom patients to divert medications, had sold those medications for profit, had attempted to frame Crane when the investigation began. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. The text messages offering to buy drugs, the unexplained cash deposits, Chen's request for access to pharmacy systems, the timing of the thefts matching Chen's work schedule. Chen's defense argued she was innocent, that someone had framed her, that Crane was the real thief, but they had no proof, just accusations. The military judge deliberated for 1 day. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, this court finds you guilty of theft of government property, fraudulent creation of medical records, and distribution of controlled substances. You were sentenced to 8 years confinement, dishonorable discharge, forfeiture of all pay and allowances, and reduction to rank E1. Chen stood in shock as they read the sentence. 8 years for crimes she hadn't committed. Valerie sat in the courtroom gallery, watched Chen being led away in handcuffs, felt nothing but satisfaction. She'd won completely. Valerie was back to her old patterns, stealing medications, selling them, using them. She'd learned from her mistakes, was more careful now, used different methods, smaller quantities, better cover stories. And she felt invincible. She'd framed Chen successfully. The Navy thought Valerie was a victim of both identity theft and PTSD. No one was watching her anymore. She got sloppy, started taking bigger risks, stealing more medications, using more heavily at work. Another patient deteriorated under her care. Petty Officer Jennifer Walsh, young woman with post-surgical complications that should have been manageable, but Valerie missed the warning signs, was too impaired to notice Walsh's declining condition. By the time she called for help, Walsh was in septic shock. Walsh survived, barely, with permanent kidney damage that would affect her for life. The incident triggered another investigation. Patient advocacy got involved. Walsh's family demanded answers about why their daughter had nearly died from preventable sepsis. The review committee examined Valerie's care, found missed assessments, delayed interventions, documentation that didn't match the timeline. Commander Crane, can you explain why you didn't recognize Petty Officer Walsh's sepsis earlier? Valerie deployed her PTSD excuse again. I was having a difficult day. My PTSD symptoms were worse than usual. I should have recognized I wasn't functioning at full capacity and requested relief. You were medically cleared for duty. If you were impaired, why didn't you report it? I thought I could manage. I was wrong, and I take full responsibility for that error in judgment. But this time, the review committee wasn't satisfied with the PTSD explanation. Commander Crane has had 2 major patient care incidents in 3 years, both involving severely impaired clinical judgment, both resulting in serious patient harm or death. PTSD doesn't adequately explain this pattern. They ordered a fitness for duty evaluation, comprehensive medical and psychological testing, drug screening. Valerie should have been worried, should have prepared, but she was high when she got the notification. too impaired to realize the danger. The drug screening found opioids in Valerie's system. High levels, consistent with chronic heavy use. Commander Crane, you tested positive for hydrocodone and oxy. Neither of these medications are currently prescribed to you. Can you explain? Valerie scrambled for an explanation. I must have taken my husband's medications by mistake. He has a prescription for back pain. I was in a rush this morning and took the wrong pills. Your husband's prescription is for a different medication at a different dose, and you have levels in your system consistent with days or weeks of use, not a single accidental dose. Then the test must be wrong. We'll retest. But Commander, this is serious. If you're using unprescribed controlled substances, we need to know where you're obtaining them. They retested. Same results. They pulled Valerie's pharmacy records, found she had no legitimate prescriptions for the medications in her system. They started looking at hospital pharmacy records, at medications that had gone missing, at the timing of those losses compared to Valerie's work schedule, and they found patterns they'd missed before because they'd been focused on Chen. Medications disappearing on Valerie's shifts. Phantom patients created using Valerie's access codes during times when Valerie was logged into the system. Cash deposits to Valerie's accounts that she'd claimed were from her husband's side business. But the husband's business had no record of those transactions. The evidence had been there all along. They'd just been looking at the wrong person. The Navy reopened the medication theft investigation, this time focusing on Valerie, not Chen. They interviewed Valerie's colleagues, asked about her behavior, her judgment, her patterns. Nurses who'd been afraid to speak before, afraid of retaliation from a senior officer, now came forward. Commander Crane has been impaired at work for years. We noticed, but we didn't want to accuse a senior officer without proof. I saw her taking medications from the dispensing cabinet that weren't for her patients. When I asked about it, she said she was covering for another nurse. I didn't question her because she outranked me. She's been making clinical errors for at least 3 years. Mistakes that put patients at risk. We documented them, but nothing ever happened. The investigators pulled records from Chen's case, looked at it with fresh eyes. The compromised access codes report, Valerie had filed it, had been created retroactively. The system logs showed Valerie had backdated the file. The text messages offering to buy drugs that had been sent to Chen's phone they traced back to a burner phone, purchased near Valerie's home. The cash deposits to Chen account they came from Shell, companies registered to addresses near residence. Chen hadn't stolen Valerie's codes. Valerie had used her own codes and then framed Chen to cover her tracks. We convicted the wrong person, the lead investigator said quietly. Chen was innocent. Crane was the thief all along. They arrested Valerie at work, walked her out in handcuffs in front of her colleagues. She tried to maintain composure. This is a mistake. I'm a victim of identity theft. Just like I told you before, Commander Crane, we have evidence that you created phantom patients to divert medications, that you sold those medications, that you framed Lieutenant Chen for your crimes, that you've been using stolen narcotics for years while providing patient care. That's absurd. Sarah Chen was convicted. The court found her guilty based on evidence you fabricated, evidence we can now prove you created to frame her. Valerie's lawyer advised her to stay silent, but Valerie couldn't help herself. You're making the same mistake you made before, accusing the wrong person. Sarah Chen is a manipulative liar who's convinced you. I'm guilty. Lieutenant Chen is currently serving an 8-year sentence for crimes we now believe you committed. She's been in prison for 2 years because of evidence you planted. For the first time, Valerie's composure cracked, because she realized they actually had proof, real proof, not circumstantial evidence she could explain away. I want my lawyer. You'll have one. You'll also have a court-martial for theft, fraud, conspiracy, distribution of controlled substances, patient endangerment, and obstruction of justice. They led her away. The Navy moved quickly to release Chen from confinement, overturned her conviction, issued a formal apology. Chen walked out of the brig after serving 2 years for crimes she hadn't committed. 2 years of her life stolen by Valerie's lies. The Navy deeply regrets this miscarriage of justice. We will restore your rank, provide back pay, and clear your record. Chen stood in the release office, processing. Valerie Crane framed me. Everyone believed her, and I spent 2 years in prison. Commander Crane is now facing court. The evidence against her is overwhelming. She will be held accountable. Will that give me back 2 years? Will that undo the damage to my reputation? Will that fix anything? The Navy had no answer. Chen was released, compensated, apologized to, but she'd never get those 2 years back, and she'd never forget that the system had believed a manipulative liar over an honest nurse. The evidence against Valerie was overwhelming. Investigators had traced 3 years of thefts, found the phantom patients, proved she'd sold over $400,000 in stolen medications, documented her drug abuse, showed how she'd framed Chen. They also found that Nash's death had been directly caused by Valerie's impairment, that Walsh's septic shock had been preventable. If Valerie hadn't been high during her shift, Valerie's defense tried every strategy, claimed she was a victim, claimed she had PTSD, claimed the evidence was fabricated, but the proof was too strong, the pattern too clear, the crimes too extensive. The military judge was harsh in his ruling. Commander Crane, you didn't just steal medications, you endangered patients. You caused 1 death and 1 serious injury through your impaired care. And when you were investigated, you framed an innocent colleague and allowed her to be convicted and imprisoned for your crimes. You are a predator who used your rank and experience to manipulate the system. You showed no remorse for your victims, not the patients you harmed, not the colleague you framed, not the institution you betrayed. The sentence was severe: 20 years confinement, dishonorable discharge, forfeiture of all pay and allowances, loss of all benefits, reduction to E-1. Valerie stood emotionless as they read the sentence, still maintaining the facade, still playing the victim even in defeat. This is a miscarriage of justice, she said calmly. I'm innocent, and eventually, the truth will come out. But there was no truth to come out. Just Valerie's lies, finally exposed. Sarah Chen rebuilt her life slowly. The Navy had given her back pay, restored her rank, cleared her record, but she'd lost 3 years to imprison, 1 fighting to reclaim her career. 3 years she'd never get back. She worked as a civilian nurse now, didn't trust the military system anymore, couldn't forget how easily she'd been framed and convicted. Do you ever think about Crane? Her therapist asked. Every day, I think about how convincing she was, how everyone believed her, how easily she manipulated the system. Chen paused. And I think about how close she came to getting away with it completely. But she didn't get away with it, only because she got sloppy. If she'd been more careful, I'd still be in prison, and she'd still be stealing and using and hurting patients. Chen's voice was hard. She's not in prison because the system worked. She's in prison because she made mistakes. That's different. Does that change anything? It changes how I see people, how I trust institutions, how I believe in justice. Chen looked at her therapist. I used to think good people won and bad people lost. Now I know that bad people often win for a long time, and sometimes good people pay the price for crimes they didn't commit. What about Crane? Do you have any sympathy for her addiction? None. She chose to steal, chose to use, chose to frame me rather than face consequences. She's not a victim of addiction. She's a predator who used addiction as 1 more tool to manipulate people. Chen lived with her anger, with her lost years, with the knowledge that she'd been destroyed by someone who'd played the victim while being the villain. And Valerie Crane served her 20 years, still maintaining her innocence, still playing the role of wrongly convicted nurse, still lying, still manipulating, still the same person she'd always been. A predator in scrubs, a villain who'd almost succeeded, almost